Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our journey, our discussion through the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to a title which already appears in the Criterion Collection on a DVD release at spine number 435, but upon this occasion it is now also being released in a new Blu-ray edition. This is a film from 1950. The filmmaker is Anthony Mann, and the name of the work is The FURIES. This is the work from 1950, and it is from the director, the great, the one, the only Anthony Mann. And it stars among its really splendid cast, people like Barbara Stanwyck and Walter Huston and Judith Anderson and Wendell Corey and Gilbert Roland and others. This is the great Western, the great Hollywood film called The FURIES. And indeed, it's called The FURIES because this refers to a very key element of the plot, and indeed the character and thematic developments of the film, namely the name of this particular ranch or piece of land that is found here in this particular time period, the 1870s, and this particular setting, the New Mexico Territory setting of the country. And this sets the stage for this particular Western drama or melodrama to unfold, because essentially we have a group of characters that we meet or are introduced to as we watch the film, and they come from various parts of, say, life in society, and all of their relationships emerge or intersect or coincide or converge through some kind of connection or context within this particular land itself, the FURIES. So the FURIES becomes the central focal point by which all the character groupings that we see in the film essentially come together, collide, or there's some kind of struggle, or there's some kind of conflict that is embodied by, or perhaps focused upon, the control of the land, the use of the land, the symbol of the land, and how that plays out to its conclusion or various conclusions. This is, in essence, the trajectory of the film. Now, in this context of the various relationships that somehow converge or coincide or intersect with respect to the FURIES, we have one of the most, if not the most important relationship among these, which is that between father and daughter. So the father, this is T.C. Jeffords, this is the man of power, the man of wealth, the patriarch, this is the character played by Walter Huston, and the daughter, Vance, who is played by Barbara Stanwyck. And in essence, it is the very complex relationship between these two characters, between father and daughter, and the relationship, how it appears at the start in terms, in particular, of how Vance, the Barbara Stanwyck character, feels about her father, and how that is made very complicated by the various aspects of the use of the land and the other characters, and how they are affected by, say, TC's ownership and power over the land, and what that means for, say, Vance's relationships with other people on the one hand, and also made even more complex by TC's own say, emotional developments on his side in terms of who he meets and who he brings and who he introduces. And I'm speaking in particular of characters like the Judith Anderson character and how that complicates the already quite complex relationship between father and daughter. In this way, the film, we see, has these two, I think, direct lines of development quite closely linked, namely the trajectory of the plot and how this power struggle between father and daughter essentially becomes one of a struggle over the control and destiny and finances and wealth and power, and how the Furies seems to represent that. And so this is a film that is a Western film that is in essence about the complex struggle for power and control and domination between father and daughter, and how the Furies, the land and the people that are affected by this land, how they are all affected by this power struggle in the context of this Western. So it's a very complex and very rich film in that respect. And then I said it's tied to another parallel track, and that parallel track is this relationship between father and daughter, because we see this relationship as a type of, say, focal point of the drama or melodrama that unfolds. And it's these points of drama or melodrama, these details that emerge, these character clashes, this jealousy that emerges, maybe a certain relationship that is very much friendly or maybe romantic with other characters here, how that has certain effects with respect to the story writ large. And so these points of drama or melodrama, of course, form the bases for the developments and the reasoning behind why the characters are doing what it is they're doing. Again, in the context of this Western melodrama, power struggle between father and daughter with regard to this particular land and the control of the land and the wealth and what it all means, which is called the Furies. And so in that way, this film is, I think, already setting the stage for a Western melodrama film that is highly, highly entertaining, and it has a rich assortment of grand and powerful and really effective performances by the actors. And also it has the ability to touch upon quite profoundly many different types of thematic concern or thematic development or treatment that make for an overall enriching, rewarding, and very nuanced viewing experience, which is the film, the Anthony Mann film, The Furies. Now, speaking of these other themes or concerns or developments, I think we can also identify how this film can be seen to be operating on various forms of, say, modes of drama. And what I mean by this is this film is classified, or can be classified quite directly, as a Western. It is a Western drama, or it's described, I think, by Criterion as a Western melodrama. And that's a very accurate description because of the time period, the setting, the various maybe story arcs that are emerging, and the way in which the struggle or the action scenes are portrayed, etc. So these have very much Western and drama or melodrama genre traits to them, which is, I think, one of the ways to look at this film. It is also, or it can be said to be, a very dark, brooding type of drama that could be said also to be hinging upon, say, traits or aspects of film noir. And this is due to The way that certain scenes are shot, the way that certain psychological elements are portrayed visually, how characters are seen in terms of the use of depth and shadow, how certain lenses that are employed tend to augment that or to intensify that particular aspect. And we know that Anthony Mann was very much a champion of using this type of space and depth. And we have Victor Milner, the cinematographer as well, capturing this type of aspect. And so this could be said to be a means by which the psychological dynamics are being captured in a visual medium. And so this might be said to be hallmarks, or links to a type of film noir genre. And also, which is also in keeping, we should say, with the sort of filmography trajectory of Anthony Mann and the types of films that he has made before. So that's another aspect, another way we can look at this in terms of genre convention. Also, in terms of modes of drama, we see too how this film is operating on, say, a reliance of dramatic traditions that can be said to be found in Greek tragedy or Greek drama. The film is called The Furies, and I think that is something that many people have remarked upon in terms of links or images or metaphors or connections made to Greek drama. And I think in some of the supplements as well, specific references are made to the idea of a powerful figure that is confronted by a very close member of his family, and this particular family member is his daughter, the Vance character. And so some people do make links in that way to parallels or maybe variations on a theme that can be said to be drawn from Greek drama or Greek tragedy. Also, the dramatic mode of Shakespeare having many stories of drama having to do with family dynamics and betrayal and people in power that are confronted by feelings of jealousy, feelings of betrayal and horror, as well as confusion and misunderstanding, leading to quite devastating consequences. And I think one of the examples of this that's cited by Anthony Mann himself in one of the supplements, as well as Imogen Sarah Smith and other scholars, is Shakespeare and King Lear, the tragedy of King Lear, and how that ties in, I think, in a very interesting way to the Furies. There are some interesting dynamics that may be variants, so it's not quite a direct adaptation of the tragedy of King Lear, but there are very clear, say, connections or reliances or links, if you will, with the story of Lear and how that might be said to be part of the way to examine or to explore this dynamic between father and daughter. In Lear we had a number of daughters and the father, the patriarch figure, of course. Here we have father and daughter, Vance and T.C. All the same, I think links to Lear and links to Shakespeare in general, I think, are very apt, because it does show a distinct level or levels of complexity in terms of how jealousy is portrayed, at the same time how love and devotion are portrayed, and what that love is and what that love means in a psychological sense. Is it a love in the context of father and daughter, or is there something else there that might be suggestive of something more quote-unquote taboo? In any event, this notion of a type of complexity, I think, is augmented or intensified further by the ability to look at this film as a type of treatment of many various modes of drama, Greek tragedy, Shakespeare, and film noir, as well as the drama or melodrama, family melodrama, and the Western itself, a Western action film. Bringing the conversation on this topic full circle, I should say also that I mentioned earlier about the connections between, say, or the possible connections with, say, the film noir genre, and the way in which this film seems to try to represent in visual terms some kind of psychological portrait of the characters that we see here. And I think that actually is also a very key point, because it also, we can talk about it not just in the context of a discussion of genre, but also just in the discussion of how this film is trying to embody or portray the various levels of a type of psychological complexity that each of these characters seems to be bringing to the table. Now, I was making reference to it a little bit earlier about, say, the relationship dynamic between father and daughter, and how this is, I think, seen to be one of the most complex and challenging aspects of this film, because it's a very it's a relationship dynamic that is playing upon many different levels of nuance, in terms, for example, about how the daughter feels about her father and what those feelings actually are, and how they are identified in terms of the externalized actions that she takes, say, in the beginning of the film, and then when certain new characters are introduced, certain jealousies tend to come about. Now, why are those jealousies coming about? That's another question that is linked to, say, the psychological character or nature of Vance as a person and her own psychological portrait, and then how she handles that particular set of feelings of, say, jealousy or feelings of betrayal. So why she feels this way and how she acts out however it is she's feeling, which brings us to the conclusion or conclusions of the film. So this is, I think, very much part of the film itself. It's an integral part of the film, namely the psychological portrayals of the characters themselves. And we see this in a type of direct conversation or direct engagement in the way in which that each of these characters, of course, acts and reacts. But in particular, when we see it in the context of a family relationship, a father-daughter relationship, and I think we can see how very strong and vivid and challenging and very, very nuanced this particular set of characters is. In other words, it is not necessarily clear as to, say, the film, well, let me put it this way, the film doesn't necessarily portray the good characters and the bad characters, and I think this is mentioned in one of the supplements, but in fact it goes towards trying to present a very complex set of characters, or to be more specific, to portray characters that have each of them his or her own very complex set of psychological traits and profiles, thus making for, I think, a very challenging, in a good way, a very challenging way to see this film, to see characters that we might root for the one minute and then maybe recoil from in disgust in the next minute. Characters that we might think are the heroes of the film, but maybe they do things that might seem to be somewhat morally ambiguous, etc. So the way in which this presents this very complicated and complex psychological profile of each of these characters, again set in the context of a film that is a Western melodrama, and indeed a film that can be described in many modes of drama and genre, I think makes for a really grand viewing experience that is also highly, highly entertaining, and also very, very engaging and very rewarding a watch. This is Anthony Mann's film, The Furies. The Criterion Collection has released this film, or this particular Blu-ray, The Furies, earlier this year, again at spine number 435. This is spine number 435 because, of course, this film already is in the Criterion Collection, and it is so in this particular DVD release. Now, my understanding is that the transfer that we had in this earlier DVD is, in fact, the same one that the Criterion Collection is relying upon for its Blu-ray release. So I had no issues with the DVD in that department, and so the Blu-ray is the same, and so it's a very good presentation of this film. But that is also another way to say that more or less what we got in the DVD release is what we will be getting in the Blu-ray release, the new Blu-ray release. There are a couple of exceptions, and so let me now go through those right now. The supplements for this particular release are excellent. They are really excellent. They are packed. There's a commentary. There are some great supplements, one of which, in fact, for the Blu-ray is new, and there's one in the DVD that wasn't carried over. But for the most part, all the supplements, or most of the supplements, have been carried over from the DVD to the Blu-ray. The first of which is the marvelous commentary track, the optional commentary track with Jim Kitsis, and this is from 2008. This is a fantastic one because Jim Kitsis is an expert in this film and an expert in Anthony Mann, and he speaks of this film in high regard. He also goes into the depth and complexity, some of the reasons why such depth and complexity might have emerged. He speaks too about Charles Schnee and Niven Bush, and also Franz Waxman, and other aspects of the production details, and then also Anthony Mann and his career. And he also goes into some very key character, developments, and he's very candid too about how the film succeeds, and it's a triumphant film, and he considers it perhaps an underrated film in the context of Anthony Mann's career writ large, and so he has great admiration for this film. But he's also candid about how the film does have certain, there are certain moments where he suggests it might rely, on stereotypes rather than the fulfillment of a promise of a type of rich character development of some of the, secondary characters. And so he is very honest in terms of where he thinks the film might be coming up short a little bit, but that is also set in the context overall of a very rich discussion from this particular expert and scholar, who is also a great admirer, obviously, of the film The Furies. So it's wonderful to have this commentary track here intact. So please check out the film with the Jim Kitsis commentary track if you can. That's not all, because then we have the one of the supplements being from 1967, and this is an interview or an excerpt from the British TV series called The Movies. And this is, as I say, from 1967. It's approximately 17 minutes. It's in black and white. And this is a British TV interviewer interviewing Anthony Mann, and this is around the time that he is making his film Dandy in Aspic, and so we see a little bit of the on-location shooting of that particular film, and we see Anthony Mann at work, and then also we see a type of sit-down interview where he's speaking in really great comments about, he's asked about some of the filmmakers that have inspired him and that have really motivated him as an artist. And he mentions, for example, Murnau, and he mentions also, or he takes the opportunity also to talk about Murnau and also the visual medium that is cinema, according to Anthony Mann, and how he values the idea of using or relying upon the visual techniques. Again, for the silent filmmakers, this is what they relied upon. But now for Murnau, he uses this as an opportunity to say that for him, it is a visual medium, and you can say so much in a shot or a particular sequence. And that is so important for him, and that means also the use of not just what's within the frame, but also the depth and people who are in the foreground versus people in the background, what that means, what that signifies, why he does that, what he wants his audience to focus on upon whom he wants his audience to focus, etc. And he then goes into a lovely discussion about how he goes into Shakespeare too, and in fact he mentions King Lear, which is wonderful. And so this is his way also of saying that he understands the idea of plays and also of literature and the value placed on the word and the written word. But for him, for cinema and his cinema, it's this idea of being able to, or having to, or trying to show within a particular moment all those feelings that are expressed in, say, the text works of, say, Shakespeare. And so he mentions, I think, the example of maybe the story of King Lear, and then there is a storm. And so that idea of showing a storm in a particular moment, that's his example that he wants to show, which is how he is trying as an artist to capture this psychological complexity all within a particular cinematic moment. And I think that is such a great comment because it links so well with the maybe philosophy that can be identified behind a film like The Furies in terms of its deep, rich, and quite fundamentally rooted psychological complexity. So this is great. So if you haven't checked it out, please check out this interview. You're getting the comments directly from the director himself. So please check it out if you can. Next, we have a new supplement that is for the Blu-ray. It wasn't in the earlier DVD, but now we have an interview with Imogen Sarah Smith. This is from 2020, approximately 29 minutes. I am a huge fan of Imogen Sarah Smith. I think she brings so much knowledge and information, and she presents it in this really easy to understand manner. And so that is a very, very great, that's a great thing to be able to do. And she does it so well. And here she is speaking about Anthony Mann, and she's talking about the Furies and her admiration for the film and how she says that every time she sees it, she discovers something new. And that's suggestive of the real rich tapestry layering of this particular film, and she refers to it as this is a mode by which Hollywood was really a creative powerhouse. And during this period of time, the 1950s or 1950, this is, in her words, which I think is so clever, Hollywood's version of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. And that is also a means by which she is suggesting how much this film is linked to Greek theater or Greek tragedy and drama and Shakespeare, as well as being a drama, as well as being a Western, as well as being a showcase for these great performances, powerhouse performances led, of course, by Barbara Stanwyck and Walter Huston. So all in all, this is another brilliant conversation from Imogen Sarah Smith. It's called Radical Classicism, and she does speak to the career of Anthony Mann and the real complex dramas and westerns that he did make. And how The Furies is, again, part of that Anthony Mann tradition. So she touches upon to the film noir aspects. She does mention Niven Bush and Charles Schnee, and she does cite these two creative forces in particular because she mentions how perhaps Niven Bush, in terms of the original story, and then Charles Schnee in terms of the adaptation for the film, how these two people in their own way were trying to bring some kind of maybe Freudian complexity or psychological complexity to this particular Western genre, this particular Hollywood film. And this is due, perhaps, as Imogen Sarah Smith suggests, to their backgrounds and their educations. And in fact, the Jim Kitsis commentary also alludes to this as well. So this is perhaps where a lot of that Freudian psychological complexity comes in from the outset. It's there in terms of Anthony Mann's treatment. It's also there in terms of the Niven Bush story and then the Charles Schnee screenplay. So again, another great conversation here. She also mentions Gilbert Roland and his performance, how I think it is, of course, maybe not the central role of the film, but she shares her admiration for this particular performance and how this does bring a certain degree, arguably so, of a type of complex, maybe, depictions that Anthony Mann was trying to bring. Even though perhaps Jim Kitsis in his commentary might suggest that some of these depictions by Anthony Mann ultimately needed to, or ultimately fell into the category of, say, stereotype, still I think there's room for this interesting conversation. Again, what Jim Kitsis has to say what Jim Kitsis has to say in commentary, and also what Imogen Sarah Smith has to say in the commentary in her own interview discussion. She also talks about Victor Milner, and this is a great means by which showcasing the importance of the camera and the shot. And this is, of course, very maybe fundamental in the context of discussion of cinema, but in particular here we have the use of the depth and the use of things in the foreground and things in the background, and also people in the foreground versus people in the background, and oftentimes they're not just in the background, they're in the way background, and so and they can be very important figures in the same conversation, and yet they are found in the distance, which is perhaps in a visual way meant to evoke or suggest the diminishing importance or the emotional receding into the background of these particular characters at that given moment in time. And this is so crucial when we see the essential sort of seesaw type of back and forth emotional dynamic that exists in this primary relationship between TC and Vance. So again, this is a wonderful conversation from Imogen Sarah Smith, and so please check it out if you can. And then to continue on, we have a 1931 interesting. It's an interview, but it's also a type of maybe a sort of fictionalized interview. In other words, it's a story that is a setup or means by which we see Walter Huston, and this is Intimate Interviews, from 1931, and this is an interview with Dorothy West. And so there's a little story about how Dorothy West is visiting Walter Huston at his residence and getting in and meeting Walter Huston. He's sitting by his pool, and then there's a back and forth friendly banter, and then he's talking a little bit about his films and the like. So this is the type of 1931 interview that would have been shown, say, in a movie theater experience as well. So this is a short type of this interview of this sort, approximately 8 minutes, and has this very charming way in which Walter Huston is showcasing his own sort of playfulness in the pool, swimming, etc. So it is in 1931, so this, of course, precedes the film The Furies, so you're not going to get any direct comments on The Furies, of course, but you are going to get a sense of Walter Huston and his screen persona, as well as maybe an indication of the type of personality that he was. So a very fascinating inclusion here, so please check it out if you can. And then we have a one-on-one interview with Nina Mann, who's the daughter of Anthony Mann, and this is also from 2008. It's approximately 17 minutes. And this interview with Nina Mann is also so fascinating. We get yet another perspective on the works of Anthony Mann, this time from Nina Mann herself. And so it's interesting to get her comments about how she understood the world and the cinematic world, viewing how they thought of her father and his works, and how she felt, because she was there. She was his daughter, and so maybe her viewpoint on her father was, of course, different than how many other people viewed him and his films. So that is an interesting dynamic that she's presenting almost immediately. And then she's talking too about how she views the cinematic legacy of Anthony Mann, and how she focuses in on how there are so many complex depictions. It's not necessarily a distinguishable heroes and villains type of dynamic. Oftentimes this line is blurred and it becomes a very morally ambiguous territory, and this is something that she sees as a type of continuity through line throughout the works of Anthony Mann. And she also mentions the type of dynamics, if you will, of the Greek drama, Greek tragedy, and the father-daughter dynamics, especially in the Furies. And so this is also touched upon in the other supplements. And so great to hear Nina Mann's comments on this as well. This also brings me to another great point, which I neglected to mention earlier, which is brought up in the other supplements as well, which is this film also deals with the way in which these types of maybe depictions of masculinity and femininity are portrayed in cinema, and how they are portrayed in this particular film, and how that also seems to be part of the, say, the character complexity of a character like the Barbara Stanwyck character Vance, in terms of her roles, or her roles as her socially acceptable roles, as it were, in terms of where she is, say, at the beginning of the film, and how those roles are maybe altered or changed, or how they were perhaps always there at the start. It's just that they became more evident as the film emerged. In other words, there is this very, I think, electrifying and dynamic way in which this film also deals with roles of masculinity and roles of femininity, and these sort of socially defined roles, and how they are either observed or how they are broken as the film progresses. And so this is also a really interesting aspect. And I think this is hinted at in many of the discussions in the supplements, in particular also this discussion from Nina Mann. So again, another great discussion and a different perspective on the works of Anthony Mann and Anthony Mann overall. So, and then the supplements end with a trailer, and that's it as far as the supplements on the disc are concerned. Now, I should just step back and say once again that just for a means of comparison, so in terms of the on-disc supplements, so what we're getting pretty much the same thing, except with the DVD, you get a stills gallery, which is not included on the Blu-ray. And then with the Blu-ray, you are getting the new interview with Imogen Sarah Smith, which you aren't getting in the earlier DVD release. So just keep those two differences in mind. But other than that, my understanding is the other supplements on disc are the same from DVD to the newer Blu-ray release. Now, let me talk about the actual physical aspect of this particular release itself, which is a digipack, which means that it has this outer shell casing, which is like so, and it houses the inner components, of which there are two. The first of which is, let's speak to this, which is the actual casing, which houses the disc and the booklet itself. So it has the disc and it has the booklet, and the booklet is it has two writings. It has the Man of the Western, which is the writing by Robin Wood, and it has the interview with Anthony Mann. And in fact, this is pretty much mirroring the booklet, or this particular booklet is mirroring the booklet which we found in the DVD, which is right here. So it's of course a little bit bigger to account for the dimensions, the size dimension differences between the DVD format and the Blu-ray format, of course. But in terms of the content of the essay and the written interview, you're getting another carryover from the earlier DVD. And it's a really great set of writings. You're getting the great interview from Anthony Mann himself, and then you're getting the scholarly essay by Robin Wood. And it's not just about the film The Furies, although it's a very important component of that essay, but it's also various themes that we were touching upon a little bit in our discussion across the filmography of Anthony Mann overall. And so that's a great essay from Robin Wood. So please check out this particular booklet. And it's a staple booklet, and it's robust, and it's thick, and it has these stills or pictures which are also found in the earlier DVD booklet version. So this is great. I love it. It's packed and it has room for many writings, and so I love it when Criterion does this or preserves this particular staple booklet format. That is not all, because we also get the second component of this digipack, which is the book, the novel, the Niven Bush novel. So this is really excellent. I love it when Criterion includes the novels. It in fact had the novel included with the earlier DVD release, and I read when the DVD came out. It was, of course, a very exciting thing, because it's not always Criterion doesn't do this all the time, but sometimes it does this with its own releases, and it has done so with a number of other very notable releases. And so when it did this with the Furies, I was so excited, and it gave me the opportunity to read the book in the DVD format. So please check out, or please read the book if you can. It's a very interesting adaptation, as I was trying to indicate earlier, and also as Imogen Sarah Smith says in a much better way than I do. She does indicate, for example, how the book and Niven Bush are trying to present a type of maybe psychological portrait, Freudian in nature perhaps, in terms of the characters and their reasonings and motivations. And so to get a sense of that, it's great to check out the source novel directly, so please do so. Now, what I have noticed is once in a while, maybe in past examples, where Criterion has re-released a particular title, including the novel as part of the supplements. Sometimes what Criterion has done in the past is they've actually shrunk, they've made this text smaller, because of course the dimensions between Blu-ray and DVD are such that the Blu-ray size dimensions are a little bit smaller than DVD. And so what that means is the book itself has to get shrunken down a little bit more to account for the Blu-ray size dimension decrease. Now, what Criterion has done in the past is on one occasion, they actually made the text smaller, and so you're getting a smaller font text in a past release. And I found that to be a little bit difficult, because it made the text for that Blu-ray release a little bit difficult to read for my eyes. The DVD release had bigger text and it was better. Well, here for the Furies, to my delight, what they have done is the text size for the Blu-ray book or the Blu-ray novel is, to my eyes, the same, or pretty much the same as the text size that you found in the larger dimension DVD book, the DVD release novel. And so that means you're getting something that is, in terms of font size, the same or pretty much the same as the earlier DVD release novel, which is great for me. It makes it easier to read. And so what that means too is that it makes for a little bit more pages to be necessary. So the number of pages in the DVD release version of the novel is a little bit less, not by much, but just maybe by a few pages. The DVD novel is a little bit less than the newer Blu-ray version release novel. So but it's again a wonderful read. Please check it out if you can. It's a treat whenever Criterion does this, and it's not always the case that they do it, but whenever they do, in other words, whenever they have a novel or this big book that is accompanying a particular release, I think that's a great opportunity, again, to further explore the sources of this, and also to get a sense of, say, the means by which the creative forces behind this film and behind the story are really trying to get at a type of complex psychological portrait of these particular characters. And so please check that out if you can. It's really worth it, and it's, again, part of this overall great package and design by Criterion of a really wonderful and challenging and surprising and deeply entertaining work from Anthony Mann, which is called The Furies. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.